All right, so we will wait a few minutes to give our members a chance to join, and then we will start off promptly so we can all respect your time. And frankly, our day got a little bit longer than we were planning, so also make it through our whole day. But welcome. For those in the audience, WTU members who want to ask a question, there is a Q&A button you should be able to press, and you can upvote questions that you're interested in. We have 3 primary questions, 2 additional, depending on how many questions are in the Q&A or not. We'll kind of see as people roll in. Yeah, I'll be giving 1 minute for everyone to answer a question. It'll be kind of a rotating order, so I'll just call on you, and then you can, go ahead and unmute and say your piece at the 30-second mark. A little 30-second remaining. Sometimes, I won't lie, I get a little caught up in the 30 seconds. I'll try to respect if I throw it up late, you'll get an extra couple seconds because I do it's nice to have that. And then I have my little happy time is up. He's happy to see you. He's also happy we can move on. Just so that we can get to a lot of questions, ideally in here from a wide range of issues. I know a minute can't get into depth on a lot of things, but hopefully, we do have your questionnaires, and we've been sending those out to our members so that can follow through. Okay. So again, welcome. This is the Washington Teachers Union Committee on Political Education Candidate Forum for State Board of Education. We're starting with wards 1 and 5. We will start with kind of an opening question, which will also hopefully allow you time to introduce yourself. And I guess before we get started, I'll have my fellow panelists introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Michael Donaldson. I am a Ward 5 resident and a Ward 3 teacher. I'm a teacher at Deal Middle School. I've been there. This is my 8th year, and I have been a long time building rep there.
What? I'm Laura Fuchs. I also happen to be a Ward 5 resident, and I teach in Ward 7. I'm the secretary of the Washington Teachers Union. I've been chairing COPE for 9 years, so hopefully going to be passing the hat to Michael here very soon. And yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started here momentarily. I'll just repeat for those who did just enter. There is a Q&A, so if you have a question and you're a WTU member that you would like us to ask the candidates, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. And after we do kind of our initial questions, we will go into that section and use your questions. All right. So the opening question, and we will be starting with Ben, is just, why should we support you?
Thanks, Laura, and good evening, everyone. I'm Ben Williams. I'm entering my 11th year teaching and deeply understand the situation in our schools. I'm a national board certified teacher, so I understand what it takes to work towards accomplished teaching. And I've taught at the elementary, middle school level, and I'm now entering my 7th year as a high school AP, US government and DC history teacher. I'd love the WT support because I'm a committed advocate for improving our schools. I'm running for the Ward 1 seat because I want to continue speaking up to solve real problems in DC's school system. And I want to work with teachers while elevating the voices of students and parents. Thanks, that goes quickly. So the stability of public education is being threatened in our city, and that's a very serious issue. And the State Board of Education is responsible for digging into that and solving that. And turnover is bad for kids, it's bad for families, it's expensive for taxpayers, and it's something that we need to solve immediately. As a passionate teacher and education activist, I want to strengthen public education, and I want to listen and continue partnering with the WTU on this issue.
Great, thank you. And I apologize, I should have asked in advance. Is it Carissa or Carissa?
It's Carissa. You got it
Carissa.
right the first.
Great. So we'll have the answer from you next.
Sure. So good evening to all the wonderful teachers and educators. My name is Carissa Stanley Beatty, and I am your candidate for Ward 5 State Board of Education. I am a working mother, I'm a wife, and I'm a proud product of the public school system. I was born right here in Washington, D.C., and chose to return here to contribute to this family, or to contribute to this community, and to raise my family. I've been a finance professional for over 20 years, and I financed just under $500 million of affordable housing in this city, which primarily benefits women and children. I am a builder of programs. I have built homeownership programs specifically for DC employees and for teachers, making the dream of homeownership in this city affordable and achievable. I believe all children deserve a quality public school education, and I believe in a comprehensive approach to education that recognizes a variety of influences on how a child learns. I believe educators are invaluable to our education system and should be supported, and I believe meaningful parent engagement is essential to the success of how our children learn. I'm excited to be with you all tonight, and I look forward to participating in the conversation.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Robert.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. I come to you as a parent who's navigated an education landscape of school lotteries and closed neighborhood schools, and as an advocate who has fought for equitable funding, facilities repairs, and safe access to playgrounds and more. In both roles, as a parent and as an advocate, I've been frustrated time and time again by a system that is overly complicated, inefficient, and too often ineffective for our students. We have a system that fails to deliver what most families seem to want: a school in their own neighborhoods where they know that students can learn, will be safe, and will have access to every opportunity and resource available to any other student in the city. I'm running for the State Board of Education to help build a system that makes sense for our students, for our families, for our teachers, and for our city. We need a system in which all the constituent parts, sectors, schools, city agencies are working together to support teachers and students so that they can learn and thrive. I believe that we can do this if we refuse to accept the unacceptable and demand a system that works for every student. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Nina.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. It's good to see everyone on the screen, and thank you for all the other people that are tuning in. Hello to you. My name is Nina O'Neill, and I am a happy resident of Brookland, Ward 5. I've been living here for the past 11 years with my husband. I am a parent of 2 adult sons. I'm a grandparent to 4. I've been a teacher or in the education field for the past 17 plus years. I'm currently a certified orientation and mobility specialist for students who are blind and visually impaired. So I've worked in special education, regular education. I've also been the parent of a son with dyslexia. So I've navigated the special ed world. And I feel like I have a lot of different experience to offer to DC public schools. And I'm excited to be more involved and to help with all the different issues, especially things that have come up during COVID.
Great, thank you. So Michael will be asking our next question.
Hi. So this is our first question. What does your vision for school governance in DC look like? And in particular, what do you see your role in it on the State Board of Education?
And we'll start with Carissa.
Yes, I would start by saying I have had the pleasure of having conversations with families across the ward. And of course, this question always comes up. I usually start my conversations by asking who in the room actually understands what the School Board of Education does. And more often than not, you hear answers that involve budget or perhaps facilities and some other stuff. And so you start with families by saying, this is what the School Board of Education does. They are primarily an advisory board and an advocate for families and children. And so that is what I am attracted to. That is what I am interested in being for families across this ward. And I know there is a ton of work in terms of resources and coordination that would be helpful to families so that they are best positioned to make sure that their children succeed in learning. So I am interested in the advocacy, and I could talk more about my vision. Clearly, I've run out of time, so I'll talk more about my vision. Yeah, about my vision as we speak more. But most importantly, I wanted to hit on the role of school board as being an advocate and a resource for the community.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Robert.
Thank you. I do believe that we need some changes to education governance in the city. I do think that OSSI needs to be independent of the mayor, so that OSSI can do the job of a state superintendent and oversee the schools in the city without interference by the person who is running that same system. I think from the State Board of Education, there's certainly a role for advocacy in that direction. Any change, of course, would have to go through the council. And I believe that as a member of the State Board of Education, leaning into that role as advocate, pushing for changes to governance, and also informing the public on our current system and what can be improved.
Thank you. Next, Nina.
I agree with Carissa. I do like the advocacy side of the State Board of Education in DC. I think DC has a very unique setup compared to especially some of the surrounding areas, but I don't think we should really rush into any kind of changes. I don't have a problem with the mayoral control. I think that the students and the teachers, everybody really at schools has been very weighed down and has had a lot of changes and upheaval and chaos over the COVID years. And so I just don't think that making any kind of changes at this time would be a great idea for the whole educational system.
All right, thank you. And finally, Ben.
Thanks. I do think that we need real reform in education governance in DC. I do think it needs to be done with care and intentionally, and we have to go at the right pace. But for me and for our city, what I think that would look best as is making OSSI independent of the mayor, so we can have a real oversight over both sectors in education and work for real standards that are equitable across both traditional public schools and the charter sector. I also think that the State Board of Education has played a role in raising issues around turnover, which prior to a lot of concerted advocacy by a lot of different parents, families, and nonprofits, there wasn't that type of oversight that was being done in our system. And the overall problem is that there lacks, thank you, real checks and balances in our system. We're not going to be able to have the type of accountability that students, families, and teachers and all community members deserve if we can't have an independent system that is willing to follow the data and follow the numbers where they actually are. And that doesn't serve Black and Brown students. That doesn't serve anyone if we don't reform our system. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. All right, so our next question is, what strategies will you employ to ensure you're actively supporting your ward regarding their educational needs? And we'll be starting with Robert.
I think the key to that is just constant communication. I've been able to stay in contact with parents, different school communities over the past several years, and I would like to continue building on those relationships that I started to build trust with community members, students, teachers, school leaders, so that they will trust me and will bring issues to me that need to be brought to the attention of the State Board of Education or to the council or to a city agency. I think regular communication and consistency, building relationships of trust is key to be able to be responsive to the needs of the schools in my ward.
Thank you. Nina.
So I agree with Robert. I think that communication is vital. Transparency is vital. I would love to visit all the different schools in Ward 5 and see some of the different programs that are going on there. I've heard from people out as I've been collecting signatures. I met a lot of people in my ward that I didn't know before, and that's been a lot of fun. And from some of them, I learned, some of them are teachers, you know, that I came across. So I learned from some of them about some of the great work that's going on in their schools where they work. And I would love to see different things like that highlighted, and maybe we could replicate really great programs and really great things that are going on in some of the schools and carry them over into other schools that might be struggling.
Thank you. And Ben.
Thanks. I also believe it's important to be very visible in the community. I think that it's important to do school walkthroughs in particular communities and get to know individual principals and teachers to understand school specific needs. I think in Ward 1 in particular, there's a need to strengthen and support dual language programs. We have half of the dual language programs in the city, and there aren't incremental supports throughout elementary and middle. There are gaps in the types of instructional resources that we have. I think that it's also important that we revive and strengthen our education council. I think that families and stakeholders need a way of coming together to be able to understand needs across school communities and feel less divided and alone in the issues and frustrations that they're experiencing. So those would be two of the main strategies that I would use in this role.
Thank you. And finally, Carissa.
Yeah, so I would really lean into 3 specific strategies, right? And I sort of have this 3-prong approach. Number 1, inform. And I talked a little bit before about in talking to ward families across the community and the ward, you realize that many families don't comprehensively understand what the State Board of Education does. So I think as a representative of the board, we have a duty to inform. I think we have a duty to advocate. I talked about that a little bit already, but that is the primary role of this board, is to be an advocate. And then I think we have a duty to be a resource. So families across the ward should be able to come to me as a State Board of Education representative, get coordination in terms of resources that they need inside of education, and also things that affect their child's education that may not be specific to the state board. So those are really my 3 strategies: inform, advocate, and be a resource.
Perfect timing.
Right on the nose.
Right on time. All right. Michael's got our next question.
Great. The next question is, what do you view as your role on the State Board of Education in increasing teacher retention?
And Nina, you'll start us off.
Okay, that's a good one. So that's a struggle that every school district, I think, across the country is having. And I think what we really need to do is figure out exactly what the root causes are, because you hear a lot of different things. I've read a lot of different articles, and some of them say one thing, some of them say another. So I think the key for us would be to talk to teachers, to be in schools, to find out, maybe send out some surveys, to kind of gather information and data and just figure out why exactly are teachers leaving. What are the issues that they're having at their schools? Is it specific to their school? Is it something with education in general? And are the problems things that we as a school board can work on and address together and help?
Thank you. Next is Ben.
Thank you. So as a community activist with Empower Ed for the last 5 years, I've led our teacher retention work with trying to elevate the importance and significance of this issue. And we do know a lot about the specific reasons in DC. So impact is harmful to teacher turnover, and we need to make sure that we can reevaluate that and allow the WTU to negotiate in that process so that we have a system that works for school improvement. We also know that we're driving out effective educators and educators of color because there aren't enough leadership opportunities, and there aren't enough schools that are willing to take teacher input into consideration. The work-life balance for teachers is something that definitely needs to be addressed. I can speak to that particularly as a teacher. But as a role of a state board member, I would be making sure that we clarify those priorities and then be able to address them one by one, and being able to work with the council and being able to work with the mayor's office to make sure that that's a top priority immediately.
Thank you. Carissa, you're next.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with both Ben and Nina. There is a lot of conversation around why we are experiencing the issues that we are with teacher retention. To Ben's point, there's a lot of conversation about impact. There's also a lot of conversation around the sequela with regards to COVID. Teachers are burned out, and I would truly love to see a world where anything that is outside of core education in terms of our children is sort of removed from the teacher's plate so that they don't continue to be overwhelmed. I would also love to work on incentives for teachers such that they feel supported in the overall system. I speak about affordable housing a lot because that is the world from which I come. Teachers should be able to afford to live in the communities in which they teach, and they should feel supported while they're doing it. So I don't think anything is off the table in terms of researching and figuring out how we can improve teacher retention. And I think it's an important thing we should do.
Thank you. And finally, Robert.
The State Board of Education has made some good progress in getting data about the reasons why teachers are leaving. And I think we need to continue to collect that data, and it's really important what we do with that data. And as Ben mentioned, we're not just relying on that data, but also the research, survey research done by Empower Ed and by the WTU allows us to listen to teachers about what is important to them. And so I think we need to use a position of advocacy to deal with each of those issues. As Ben mentioned, I think impact is long overdue for being replaced by a better system of evaluation. I think that a contract is the least we can do for our teachers to give them the stability that anybody would want for their job. And I think I agree with Ben in looking at each of those issues one by one that teachers have named as the issues that matter the most to them.
All right, thank you. So we're going to leave our pre-written questions and head into the Q&A box. And our first question in there is, what is your position on the school rating systems, specifically the star rating used for DC schools? And we're going to start with Ben.
Thanks. I don't think that the star rating system helps us as a city. I think that we need to go beyond this view of good schools and bad schools. And we need to be able to provide families with meaningful information that can help them understand the programming that exists at a school, that can help them understand the teacher satisfaction that exists at the school, the student satisfaction that exists at the school, how embedded teachers and principals are in that community so that they can know the stability that they are there with, understand the social and emotional supports that are available. So the short answer is that we need to go beyond the star rating system to provide a comprehensive and holistic dashboard. Kids are more than a number and more than a test score, and our schools should be viewed as more than a number and more than a test score. And if we want to have an educated community, then the state board's role should be to push for that comprehensive information so that our community can really know what's going on in our school system.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Carissa.
Yeah, so I am going to answer this question as a parent that has a young child that has gone through the process of thinking through the school system and figuring out our priorities as a family and where we thought our kid would be best suited. I will be honest with you, I actually use the STAR system, and I say that to be fully transparent. I understand that there are issues with it. I agree with Ben that there is no, good kid, there is no bad kid, but I do firmly believe in some sort of gradation system so that parents can have an informed approach to evaluating schools. Now, I believe that that can be combined with more meaningful information, but I don't necessarily think that there is merit in completely abandoning some sort of gradation system. I just think it should be comprehensive and combined with other meaningful information.
Thank you. Next we have Robert.
I think that we're moving in the right direction and getting away from a star rating. And I think that it is true that there's a lot more information that is important to parents and to other stakeholders that they want to know about our schools. And as long as there is a star rating or a summative number, it's really hard not to look at that number or that star rating. And that can really be misleading about what's going on inside of a school. And I think the implications of having star ratings have not been good for our system. So I think we should continue to move away from star rating. It would be great if we also did not have a summative number rating, which can be misinterpreted. As a parent, like I wanted all that information too, but I know that a number doesn't really tell me the story of what's going on inside of a school.
Thank you. And Nina.
Yes, I agree. The star rating system is necessary. We have to have some kind of rating system. It's kind of like testing. You have to have some kind of testing. It's really hard to get information any other way. But I agree that we could add to it. We could add more information. I think when I looked at the report card and the star, kind of mingled those together, that gave me a little more information. But I think the star rating does give some academic information that's valuable for parents. But I definitely would want to add more to that and maybe give parents some option of interviewing at schools or some kind of extra input that they could get visiting schools.
Thank you. So we do have time for one more question. So I'm just going to pull the next one from our audience. And I guess it's kind of maybe to further expand on mayoral control. So the question asks, what conversations have you had with W2 members to know our position on mayoral control? And suppose if you want to expand on your own position and how it relates to ours. And we're going to start with Carissa.
So I would not be so bold or presumptuous to say that I understand the WTU's position on mayoral control. I would be gracious and allow the WTU to say what their position is on mayoral control. In terms of how I feel about it, clearly there can be divisive conversation around that topic. And in terms of education, what I prefer to do is come from a place of consensus and come from a place of what do we agree on. I think these latest park results that were released are worth a conversation. And I think as an education community, we can agree that none of us are happy with that and that we want to see improvements in that. And so any change or improvement in the system that actually contributes to that is what I would want to talk about versus necessarily diving into a topic that we know is divisive. And so I'd rather approach it from a place of consensus.
Thank you. Next, we will have Robert.
I know I've had some conversations with WTU members about mayoral control, and I think generally I share a lot of the frustration that teachers have had with the status quo. And I think that's why we need to take a serious look at alternatives. They don't have to be drastic. I think there are some very sensible things to do, like making OSSE independent. But I also think we need to change the culture that we have in which school leaders, the chancellor even might not feel like they are able to say what they need to say, or teachers might not feel like they're able to say what they need to say in terms of asking for help, saying what resources schools need under our current system. So that has to change. We need to do better.
Thank you. Next, we have Nina.
As I said before, I wouldn't want to make any major changes to the hierarchy at this time because of all the COVID losses and just the issues that are going on in schools. I feel like we really need to get a handle on student learning, getting students back to where they need to be, shoring up the kids who really suffered the most, which is the lower income kids and the special education students. And I think that really needs to be the focus. So I agree. I think I would be willing to talk about anything with the board, and I agree that we all have to work. We're all on a team together. So we all need to work together. But again, I wouldn't change the mayoral control at this time. I think it provides accountability because since she is the elected person that, has to answer to the public for any kind of decisions that she makes.
Thank you. And finally, Ben.
Thanks. I do agree with Nina that learning and restoring where our kids are should be our top priority. I think we can do that and have a larger city conversation about moving away from mayoral control. I think that, throughout the last 15 years of mayoral control, we've seen that there's been scandals, there's been pressure on graduation rates, and there's been really lack of voice and responsiveness in our education system. So a public education system, in my view, should be about creating democracy and real checks and balances in which our elected officials are accountable to the public. We have not seen a willingness of the mayor to work with the union. The contract is great evidence of that. And we need to be able to move incrementally to a system that creates real accountability and real transparency for both sectors, because that's the only real way to advance real equity in public education. We can keep pretending that this is going to create real information that we need, but it's not, and we need to move away from it slowly and incrementally.
Thank you. 30 minutes really does kind of fly by. We really appreciate your time, questionnaires. If you'd like, there are some additional questions in the Q&A. So if I'll be unpinning you, but you could stay in as a panelist for a little bit. And if you'd like to, in the chat, please, not in the Q&A itself, but in the chat, if you would like to answer some of the questions we were not able to get to, please feel free. So I'm just going to need a few minutes to do some moving people around, but again, you're welcome to answer the Q&A questions in the chat if you'd like. Just make sure it's set to everyone so that they can see it. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.
I echo that. Thank you, everyone.
All right. So if you're a candidate, I am going to try to find you and promote you to a panelist. If your name perhaps doesn't match, then please raise your hand. Joshua Wiley, I see you have two. I'm going to promote both, but probably we only need one. And Eric, if you are here, please go ahead and raise your hand and I will promote you. Thank you. All right, so hopefully you should have gotten an invitation to be promoted to a panelist. Joshua, please check your device. You are getting requested to be promoted to a panelist. Thank you. Nope, declined. Let's see. Yeah, it's getting crowded. So looking for, oh, there we go. I think got everybody. No. Yes. Okay. Sorry. It's a lot of things on one small laptop screen. All right. So welcome. My name is Laura Fuchs. I'm the current chair of the WTU's Committee on Political Education. I've been so for 9 years now. And this is our candidate forum for the State Board of Education for wards 3 and 6. For those WTU members who are in our audience, you are welcome to put questions in the Q&A, and you can upvote questions that you really want to be asked now that we have multiples, and we probably won't be able to get to all of them, at least verbally. Though same as I offered just now to the previous ward candidates, you are welcome to type some answers into the chat for a little bit. But we'll probably close that down in a few. All right, so the way it'll work, as you probably saw, I've got my little 30 seconds. Your 1 minute warning. I will try. Sometimes I get distracted if I'm trying to multitask. And so it might be like 10 seconds off. And I'll try to be nice and not just throw up the time is up immediately and give you a little extra time since it's my bad. But yeah, so we get a little time. Happy time is up. And I'll go ahead and let my co-panelist introduce himself.
I am Michael Donaldson. I am a teacher in Ward 3. I'm a Ward 5 resident. And I am excited to hear what you all have to say.
All right, so I'll just kind of be calling on y'all in more or less in order by ward and then alphabetical by last name, and we'll just kind of rotate the order of who goes first. All right, so the first question is real simple, and it is, why should we support you, the WTU? Why should the WTU support you? And we're going to start with Eric.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thanks to the members of the Washington Teachers Union for joining us tonight. I've served 19 years in DC government, and throughout my career, I've been a supporter of public education in the district, both as the DC Council Budget Director and as the Budget Director for the Executive Branch, each for 4 years. And I want to be able to put that experience to work. As I ran for the Ward 3 Council seat, I was able to talk to residents across Ward 3 about issues, and residents raised the issue of school overcrowding in Ward 3 as a top priority for them. So I want to be able to work. We have two important things coming up this year. I want to work with the teachers union on that. One is the boundary study, and the other is the funding adequacy study. And I want to work on the issues related to the teachers contract with WTU and use my expertise in the budget to be a partner to WTU as we move forward on the State Board of Education.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Michael.
Hey, thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to your members tonight and answer some questions. There's nothing really special about me. I'm just an involved dad. But the reason I'm the best candidate for the Ward 3 seat starts with the decision that my family and I made to actually be DCPS parents. My 3 children attend Horace Mann Elementary School, and I'm a proud and involved parent there. I've actually dealt with school budgets before because I've served on the Key LSAT, so I've actually gone through that process. As an ANC member, I'm also the only candidate directly involved with the community. Our ANC has gone from one that's very insular, that fights development, to one that's granted $13,000 in just this last year to our 2 elementary schools, one that fights for robust transportation infrastructure that helps our students be safe, more sidewalks, better timed lights, and more crossing guards. And finally, we fought private school deals that have gotten in the way of progress for our public schools. Public space should be for public uses.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Brandon.
Hey everyone, my name is Brandon Best. I'm a 2nd generation Washingtonian, and I'm running because I believe our public school students and our charter school students should have the same offerings and experiences as private school students. If you look at what we say that our children need in order for them to be successful post-high school, and you backwards map what's actually being provided in our schools, I'm not sure that they always align. I'm running because for me, this race is personal. My first school I ever attended was in Ward 6. My mother got married in Ward 6. I supported schools, teachers, families, and communities in Ward 6. And in addition, I've taught in DC for 10 years and amplified the voices of families, communities here in the district as well, in both the DCPS and charter school sector. I'm with you today because I believe the single most important factor in a school student success is the quality of the teacher in the workforce. We have no ecosystem without our teachers. I've lived this experience here. If elected, I plan on having a long-standing partnership with the WTU while elevating the voices of teachers by creating a Ward 6 Teacher Council to advise the board. While I do believe in student-centered educational approaches, I want to also make sure that the policies make sense for everyone, and that includes our teachers.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Joshua.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Wiley, and I'm an assistant principal here in DCPS, and I'm running for the State Board of Education, Ward 6. As a third generation educator, I know the inner workings of the educational landscape. And I too am tired of people making decisions for schools who don't work in schools or don't send their kids to school or only work in central office. I will not only be accountable to the members of the WTU, but the constituents in Ward 6. I also have 376 little ones that and their parents that look to me daily for honesty, trust, and fairness. When elected, I will commit, 30 seconds. When elected, I will commit to equity, advocating for teacher rights, and uplift the prestige honor of being an educator in DC. I have the experience of a teacher, mentor, and school leader, and I know what it takes to get our school system back on the right track. Wiley for Ward 6. Ward6wiley.com too, don't forget that.
Thank you. All right. So Michael will be asking our next question.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm rapidly taking notes and, and looking at the questions. So the next question is, what does your vision for school governance in DC look like?
We'll start with Michael.
Thanks. I try to look at this issue structurally. And for me, it's really important that something as important as education has the largest public spotlight on it. Therefore, I believe that mayoral control serves that interest. That doesn't mean that the system's perfect, though. I believe there's a real accountability issue that's at play when the mayor, who's accountable for the success of an assessment every year, is the direct report to of the person responsible for doing that assessment. So I'd be willing to consider changes that would make OSSE more independent. The superintendent could be nominated by the mayor, approved by the council, and fired only for cause, and then serve in a capacity.
I believe you're muted, Michael.
Sorry, something happened with the sound.
It's a drastic change, and it could keep the public spotlight where I think it needs to be.
Hi, Michael. I think we missed part of your what you were saying because I think you went on mute.
Oh, okay. Where did I get cut off? I don't want to screw up
the
the time.
last 20 seconds. It's okay. Go ahead with the last 20
So
seconds.
we heard up until, well, I heard up until you stated changes being that OSSE accountability issue, OSSE being more independent.
Yeah. So basically, what I think we should consider doing is having the mayor nominate the superintendent, the council approve the superintendent, have that superintendent be independent, being able to be removed only for cause, and similar to what we do with the Fed chief at the federal level, the Federal Reserve chief, have the term not be coterminous with the mayor's term, so that it may serve 2 years of a mayoral term, and then the next mayor would get to appoint the new superintendent 2 years into the next term.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll hear from Brandon.
Thank you. So I want our students to experience everything that learning can be. Our students deserve to learn and experience what our communities and our cities and honestly the world have to offer. So how do we get there and how will I help? Well, I'll start by saying that my primary role would be to amplify the voices of the communities and our families. I believe there's a solution to every problem, and the people who are often best suited to solve those problems are the ones who experience them daily. And that means that I have to include all of our stakeholders in our decision-making process. And that's what I've been doing for the last 18 years. I've served managing family engagement projects for DCPS, and I've amplified the voices of families and communities and teachers in schools, both locally and now nationally. And that's what I would do here in Ward 6. I would amplify the voices of our communities to ensure they had a voice in the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Joshua.
Hello. So in early elementary school, I know that students learn about checks and balances in government, and we currently don't have that in our educational space. As an educator and a school leader, I know school governance should be consist of an elected body. With the State Board of Education involved in the policy making process without the interference of mayoral control. We need accountability, transparency, and oversight, especially for the charter schools who have no oversight. I want to make sure that all students have equitable standards, and their teachers are treated fairly by highly qualified teachers, and that body will oversee that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Eric.
Thank you, Laura. I think there's two issues here. One is the legislated structure we have right now, which I do support. I've really liked since 2003, seeing from where we were when I came to DC government to where we are now in terms of accountability. And I think mayoral control provides that accountability. The question is, are we going to hold the mayor accountable if we feel that something hasn't been done right? And I think that's one thing that we can do with the board. The board has its statutory role, and then the board has an advocacy role, which is organizing residents in Ward 3, listening to residents in Ward 3. And what I would like to see us do is get a coalition of residents together through, right now we have the Ward 3 EdNet, which does a great job with this, but to testify on legislation, to advocate for the mayor at the budget meeting she holds before the budget, and then with her staff personally. I think that advocacy role that we can do with the state board is very powerful. And I think that can drive change without having to change the statutory structure we have right now for education.
Thank you. All right, our next pre-written question is, what strategies will you employ to ensure you're actively supporting your ward regarding their educational needs? And we will be starting with Brandon.
Thank you. Well, the strategy that I've been using since I started in education the strategy I use is a three-pronged strategy. It's inform, engage, and empower. Sharing two-way information, engaging and building partnerships, and creating opportunities for our families to become advocates for our children. And one of my first goals would be to once again build a parent council to supplement the work that we've already done with our students. So once again, getting our parents to be brought in and making sure that I'm doing the outreach to reach out to our families and our communities.
All right, thank you. Joshua.
Excuse me, I would develop communication. Communication is key. When you work in the school every day like I do, I know that parents need to communicate and have an avenue and a platform to address some of their needs. And many families don't know about these avenues that they have. I will ensure that parents are going to state board of education meetings, at local ANC meetings, meeting with the council member when they can. Some of the work I've done by listening to the needs of families, we created flexible parent-teacher conferences where we can get them on Saturday in the morning or in the afternoon. I will continue to work with the Ward 6 public school parent organization to gather people together and continue to be a resource, the hub for resources, and to address their needs.
Thank you. Eric. So I think you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now, Laura?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. One thing that I've really wanted to try to do is working with the community at every step of this process we have right now. We're doing everything from the social studies curriculum that we're looking at within OSSE right now to the very nuts and bolts that we see with the budget process. I don't think there's enough transparency in the school budgeting process right now. There's legislation before the council right now, which I think is well intended and can be tweaked. But what I would like to see is true involvement in these two important steps that we have coming up, which really only come along once every 5 years. And that is making sure that we build capacity in Ward 3 schools to accommodate all pre-K 3 and all pre-K 4. Right now, we are the only ward in the city that doesn't have pre-K 3 and 4. And there's only 2 schools outside of Ward 3 that don't have pre-K 3. That's Ross and I believe Ross and one other one, I think Shepherd maybe the other. So we've got to make sure that we get the modernization right, and then making sure that the adequacy study is done right. There's a problem with large schools in Ward 3 that are underfunded, and we need to address that issue in the upcoming budget and adequacy study.
Thank you. And finally, Michael.
It's wonderful that Eric wants to be involved at the community level, but if you look at this from the standpoint of records, there's only one candidate who has a record of actually having been involved at the community level for a long time, and that's me. I really believe in full stakeholder engagement, and I think I've done that. The reason the DCPS has finally stepped up to the plate to address school overcrowding by building capacity in Ward 3 is because I've worked with a coalition of parents and families and community leaders to actually push for that. And all the other things I've done. I haven't done it myself, but I've worked in coalitions. We work in a wide circle and we try to speak with one voice. Sometimes it's hard to advocate for Ward 3 before the council. We really have to be united when we do it. So I think I have a record of doing that, and I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you. And Michael, I'll be asking our next question.
Great, the other Michael. I am asking our next question, which is, what do you view as your role on the State Board of Education in increasing teacher retention?
And we'll be starting with Joshua.
Okay, as the only person, or the only candidate on here, only DC public school candidate on here who's actually experienced the racially biased impact system, I know firsthand one of the main issues that affect teacher retention. My role as a member on the State Board of Education is to be the conduit that bridges teachers and equity. I will advocate alongside the WTU, like I've done before when I was a member, for fair and equitable evaluation systems, safe working conditions, and will push to make sure that teachers and educators have livable wages in DC.
That works too. All right, next we have Eric.
Well, a lot of times when this issue comes up, people cite teacher pay, but that really ignores a lot of issues in DC that drives whether we retain teachers or not. I mean, the biggest thing in DC is the cost of housing, and we lose teachers who just simply don't see a path forward to being able to purchase a home here in the communities they serve, and that needs to change. We need to get much more aggressive, and it's going to be at the council level. This isn't at the state board level, in terms of being able to put subsidies aside to make sure that teachers can afford to buy here in Ward 3 and throughout the city. The other thing that we really need to look at is the impact system. I've heard a lot of concerns from teachers about this. Every evaluation system can be tweaked, and I'm going to have an open mind in working with our teachers in terms of hearing them and doing what we need to do to improve the quality there. Finally, what I want to really try to emphasize to our teachers in our WTU is I'm somebody who throughout my career has listened to stakeholders who've come in. As committee director, as budget director, I always held community meetings and listened to our residents, and that's what I want to do. I want to hear from our teachers what they need.
Thank you. Michael.
Thanks a lot. One of the things I really want to lean in on is great work that's being done right now to work out a better and more flexible scheduling system for teachers. What's so good about this movement right now is that it's putting old cleavages and fights aside. I know that City Bridge and the WTU were working on this, and there's a lot of promise. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of us in our professional lives have found that we have more flexibility. We have more time to take our kids to the doctor, go to sports lessons, do practices. Teachers deserve that too if they can. And having a more flexible system for scheduling for teachers that can work and that can guarantee that teachers will be in the classroom to be there with our kids is important. So that's something I really want to lean into. I also hope that we can scope out the new social studies curriculum, which I'm really excited about. But I want teachers to be involved in how the lessons are parsed out so that it makes sense for how they want to structure it in their classrooms. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, we have Brandon.
Yeah, thank you very much. As a person who's taught in DC for 10 years, I care about the well-being of our teachers just as much as anybody in this room. And I'll fight to ensure the policies that we make actually make sense for everyone, including our teachers, because without a teacher workforce that feels satisfied, fulfilled, adequately paid, and can actually find joy in their work that they do. See, here's the thing. If our teachers don't find joy in what they're doing, then our students can't thrive. There's no worse feeling than to feel underappreciated, under-resourced, underpaid. So I like to read, and whenever I get a chance, one of the last publications I actually read was the Teacher Attrition Survey. And one of the things that it was saying was one of the biggest issues was impact, teacher safety, mental health. These were the primary things that were impacting our teachers wanting to come back. So if we're talking about what can we do, well, we look at the problems. We need to reevaluate our system. If only 43% of our teachers are saying they have confidence in the district-wide teacher evaluation system, then we need to do something about that. Create programs that incentivize teacher retention. Our teachers' mental health is huge. As a person who used to teach, as a person who used to teach for 10 years, I know that personally. Sorry for going over.
I hear you. Thank you. We're going to switch over to our member questions. And our next question comes from Jacqueline. And it is, what is your position on creating and supporting teachers and having healthy working conditions? For instance, COVID testing, working HVAC systems, and 25 or less students in a classroom. I'll post in the chat so you can see it. And Eric, we're starting with you.
Okay, great. I mean, this is one of the most important issues here in Ward 3 due to the school overcrowding issue. With Deal, with Jackson Reed, the number of students in classrooms, we heard was upwards of 35 to 40 in some cases. That's completely unacceptable. It places a lot of pressure on our teachers. It's difficult to manage. It's difficult to distance kids safely in a room like that. So that's got to change. We need to build new schools here in Ward 3, and we need to make sure that we do it in a way through this boundary study that makes sense for Ward 3 and then citywide. And the other issue we need to do is DGS oversight. That's something I really want to develop in working with our parents in Ward 3 and frankly our students who are on the front lines of these issues, to have a website with a reporting system where people can let me know if there's a work order that's lagged or problem, particularly with our HVAC systems right now. And there's no excuse for DGS to fall behind on repairs that are lagging for months. And we need the proper oversight over that. And I intend to provide it as a member of the state board.
Thank you. Sorry, Brandon, you're next.
So I also agree that having some type of oversight is very important on this issue. Look, COVID is not a thing of the past. It's still here. Once again, with the 2021 teacher attrition survey noted that COVID safety was one of the leading factors for our teachers wanting to leave or even trying to consider leaving. So I think that we need that, but we also need more transparency about what's actually taking place as far as DGS. Thank you. As far as DGS is concerned with the dashboard and how fast we're responding to issues.
Thank you. Joshua.
So this question is especially important to me because I do work in the DC schools and I know about healthy working conditions and the importance of healthy working conditions for teachers and educators and students. I think that we need healthy working conditions. When a teacher's out and I may have to cover a class, more than 25 students is unreasonable to ask somebody to teach if you want them to have a quality education where you can get to each student. I think that teachers need not just COVID leave, permanent COVID leave, but they need dedicated leave for flu and for other illnesses that may occur, not just when they feel like they want to put them on. I've worked in a school that didn't have AC in DC during the summer, and trust me, those days are high. And you may have to move your room or go to other places. So I think it's really important to hold DGS accountable and making sure that these things are getting fixed and they're getting handled in a timely fashion to make sure students, teachers, and parents don't send their kids to school in places that are not learnable. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like I've messed up the order somewhere here. I apologize for that. Did anyone not get to answer? Who did I start with? I've lost it.
I didn't get the answer.
I think I forgot Michael. I apologize. So Michael, you get to have the final word.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really quickly in response to something that Eric said, it's good and important to talk about the need for addressing overcrowding. It's another thing to have been involved in supporting steps that have been taken to address it. And during the council race, Eric expressed opposition to the uses that DCPS has come up with for the 2 new parcels that it's selected for new schools. That's problematic because of how much work and effort families across Ward 3 have put in to getting this done and having it finally done. And just to run into that opposition is kind of a slap in the face. And I wish he'd reconsider his position from the council race. To answer the question, though, I want to really dig in on very quickly on the HVAC aspect of it. The city's rollout of HVAC improvements was terrible. What I'd like to see is something that Boston did, which is constant monitoring of conditions in schools. And that happened because leaders were willing to listen to teachers when they reported that, yes, we have problems at schools that you may not realize. And leadership said, all right, we'll meet you halfway and we'll monitor things. So monitoring is really important, real-time monitoring.
All right, so we're gonna have time for one more question and then we will be transitioning to our final panel. And it will come from the Q&A again. So this is about testing. This person says there has never been a generation of students more tested than the current K-12 students. Most schools plan little instruction in the fourth quarter because of all the end of year testing. These two elementary schools are reporting that they are required to test every week. What is your position on testing and the number of tests and the instructional days lost to testing? And we are going to start with Michael.
To be honest, I don't know what the correct number of days that we should be testing is. And what I do know is that we need longitudinally consistent data that shows us how we're doing in terms of progress, in terms of tracking progress, in terms of measuring growth and achievement, and in terms of linking what's being taught to what's being tested. We can't just prepare kids for tests. Tests need to reflect what's being taught. So sorry that I don't have more specifics, but that's a bottom line answer.
Thank you. Next we have Brandon.
Yeah, I think my response to that is pretty simple. Testing is only one measure and should be used as such. It shouldn't, in my opinion, be an every week thing. We can truly assess progress without having students take a test. There are more ways to go around it. But we do want to make sure that we also assess our students' progress. But there are ways that we can do that without taking tests every week. So as far as that, I'm not a significant proponent of taking tests every week.
Okay, thank you. Joshua.
Hello. I definitely know what you meant when whoever posed the question talked about testing every week. We had RCTs that were every week, district ANET tests that were every week, and then Park, that's like 3 weeks out in the fourth quarter. It's way too much testing for students and teachers. Teachers are burned out from sitting in those testing environments, and it's not a good measure. Not the only measure, the only way we can measure students. Look at the iReady testing that students take right now. It's diagnostic, and it shows the students' growth throughout the year and from one year to the next. Students do need to take an assessment. I think something like the iReady test would be great, but not over testing, because testing is only good and reasonable when you use the data to make changes. And some of the tests we give the students mandated are not necessarily used to move students. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Eric.
Thank you, Laura. I'm not wedded to any specific testing model. I know I've heard concerns about the Park, nor really any sort of specific number of days that the students need to be tested per year. I think what we need to do is measure whether students are ready for either college or a job when they're graduating, and then have metrics through standardized testing that make sure they're on track for one of those goals at the end of their school. So that's what I'm wedded to. I do want measurement, but I'm going to go into the State Board of Education looking to learn about this issue from the members on that board, and go in with an open mind about how we can best measure the progress of our students. In my last 30 seconds, I want to respond to something Michael said in the last round. I wrote the original School Modernization Act back in 2006, which started the $5 billion modernization of all our public schools here in the city. So we involved the community extensively on that, and then we got the votes for the massive package. So I know how to work with the community on issues like that. Also, I've never said that I don't support something. I've expressed concerns about building on green space And I want to look at these issues holistically through the boundary study. That's what I support.
Thank you. All right, so I do want to thank you for your time. 30 minutes passes very, very quickly. We definitely appreciate it. Similar to kind of what I offered to the Ward 5 and 1 candidates, kind of while we're transitioning and maybe for like the first 5 minutes or so, allow you to kind of stay in the panelist space to type some answers. I did change the settings, so you should be able to now type them to everyone. So if you saw a Q&A question we didn't get to, or there have been some that have been popping up in the chat directed at sometimes specific groups or people, if you want to answer one, feel free. You by no means have to, but I'll give you some time to do that while I transfer.
Laura, thank you very much. Candidate, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start promoting people to panelists. We have a couple WTU members who are going to be helping ask questions, and then also, of course, our candidates. And I appreciate you giving us that extra 4 minutes. If your name in the system is not the same as yours and you're a candidate, I think I'm seeing everybody. Okay, things are moving. Okay, I think I got everyone. So Lisa, I am trying to promote you to panelist. Start, let's see, some pins. Appreciate your patience, just a little logistics. Okay.
Laura, since we see so many good questions in the chat, can people just send them to me by email? I'd be glad to answer them all. I feel like I'm picking favorites if I answer one of them. So
Sure.
Is that possible to just get the rest of the questions from the chat and then, provide a written response?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So because I'm not like the host, I don't know where the questions will be downloaded. So if you want to probably either copy pasting them, or if you want to put your email in there to have people email you.
Eric, there's 3 dots in the bottom of the chat box on the right. If you click on it, it'll allow you to save the chat.
Oh, look at that. Kareem, you're the man. Good job.
Sometimes the settings are on, sometimes they're not.
I learned something new every day here. Thank you, Kareem.
Sure.
All right. Sorry, just adding some pins here. In. Where's Kim? Sorry, does he not make it to panelist? Yeah. Sorry, let's try that again. I apologize. I thought it worked. There we go. I think I've got this all. All right, and Concha and Lisa, do you have access to the questions? Or do you need me to cut and paste them in the chat when the time comes? Sorry, I can't hear you, Concha.
I may be able to pick them up from my other phone. I'm getting ready to turn off, and so I can be stationary.
Okay, no problem. We'll hold your question towards the later part.
Which
Okay.
question, which question did you want me to ask? I see you have the at-large question 1, 2, and 3.
How about question 2?
All righty, that sounds good. What strategies will you employ to ensure? Yes, got it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So welcome, everybody. My name is Laura Fuchs. I am the chair of the WTU Committee on Political Education, have been for the past 9 years. It's been a long run here, hoping to pass it off soon to Michael sitting near me virtually. But I'm a teacher at HD Woodson for the past 16 years. I'm a resident of Ward 5, and I definitely vote in every election like a religion. So we're definitely excited to hear from all of you as we begin looking at the at-large independent seat. And we'll have our panelists also introduce themselves, starting with Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Donaldson. I am a Ward 3 teacher at Deal Middle School. I've been there. This is my 8th year at Deal. I'm also a proud Ward 5 resident, and I'm also very interested in listening because I also vote every election.
And Kanja, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Oh, sorry, I think you're muted again. It's my fault.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Concha Johnson. I'm currently a teacher in early childhood education at Whittier Elementary School. I live in Ward 4, and I've been at Whittier for 11 years. And I'm a proud WTU member for over a decade. And I'm very interested in learning about the council and its interest in helping the city.
Thank you. And we have Lisa.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Haynes, and I am a teacher at Bunker Hill Elementary School, Ward 5. I've been teaching in the District of Columbia going on 29 years. I don't reside in the district, but I've always taught in the district. So, of course, I'm very concerned and attached to the things that involve the students that I serve.
Thank you. So basically, the way we'll be running things is we'll try to get through many questions, giving everyone 1 minute to respond. I think my list is just in alphabetical order by last name to kind of begin, and then we'll start cycling. So like a different person will start each time, though we're just going to maintain the order because we've already seen I can forget who I've called on, and if I make it too complicated, all bets are off, and we don't want that. So if I do accidentally skip you, please just let me know. It's not intentional. I'm just multitasking, trying to manage all the logistics here. And at the 30-second mark, I will try my best to right at 30 seconds hit it. If I'm a little late, I'll give you a little extra time because I know I didn't give you a warning. And then my little happy time is up. I'll be smiling at you, but I would prefer if you wrap things up so we can get to many different questions, including those from our audience. And speaking of which, if you're a WTU member, please feel free to use the Q&A. That's really the easiest way for me to keep track of the questions. I did see some in the chat before, but you could put it in the Q&A. That would be preferable. And you can then upvote questions because we won't be able to get to all of them. So you can then kind of give a little thumbs up, click the thumbs up for the ones you would prefer to see answered. And that's how we're going to determine which questions get asked. So if you do have one you really want asked, put it in the Q&A. Have people upvote it, and that should be great. We are recording this, and we'll be putting it in a Dropbox, which is then available to our members and the general public to see. Yes, that should be covering just about everything. So I'm going to take the first question, which is pretty simple, which is why should we support you? And we will, and I'm sorry, I'm using first names, but we'll start with Fred.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. My name is Fred Hill. I am a 25-year successful business owner here in the district, and I have hired over 500 DC residents. 150 or so have been returning citizens. And one of the things that I'm calling for in the city right now is that our fire emergency staff, our police, our educators, and our sanitation workers all to get a 30% pay raise because in my studies, I've found that they were grossly underpaid. Much of what has happened through our public safety challenges also affect those in the schools. I'm a father, grandfather, and I'm also, as a grandfather, one of my children are special needs children. I have one in middle school and I also have one in high school. So I look forward to be your council at large candidate for November 8th. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Next, Kareem.
Can you hear me? Okay. So first off, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for having all of us here to give us a chance to talk about our vision for the District of Columbia and how we can advance not just the interest of the WTU, but the interest of education policy for the district as a whole. My name is Kareem D. Marshall. I am a proud third-generation Washingtonian and a very, very proud and grateful product of the District of Columbia Public Schools. I went to Malcolm X for pre-K, Magogny and Ambeers for elementary, Francis for middle school, Banneker for high school. And that constellation of preparation and investment by teachers, District of Columbia public servants is what gave me the basis to allow me to succeed at Dartmouth and come back to DC to become a successful attorney. The reason you should support me is because what's most important to me is I am approaching this from a perspective of an irreconcilable debt. I owe so much to the teachers who took not just their job, but extra time out of their lives to pour into me. And I wasn't a particularly perfectly well-behaved child, who were patient enough with me to give me second or third chances to set me up so that I could be successful. And if you support me, you will have no stronger champion for education on the council than anyone else.
Thank you. Next we have Kenyon.
Can everybody hear me? I apologize. I'm having some technical issues here, both with the visual and volume. Okay, perfect. Thank you. It's good to see everybody. Thank you all for hosting us on this. My name is Kenyon McDuffie. I represent Ward 5 on the council and have done so for the last 10 years. I am a fourth generation Washingtonian and a product of the District of Columbia, including a graduate of Woodrow Wilson, now Jackson Reed High School. You also support me because I care deeply about our city broadly, but also understand how important education is to the future trajectory of generations of youth who are in our city today. I know because I experienced what it means to graduate from a school and not have opportunity to move forward in life, how important it is that teachers, and not just WTU, but teachers broadly, have the supports that they need so that students can grow, learn, and be prepared to go to college or to enter the workforce. And I've worked collaboratively with WTU over the course of my 10 years with a listening ear, making sure that I ask questions first and support through action in the budget process. So I would ask for your vote, one of two of your votes, Laura and all in the WTU. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Graham.
Well, like the other candidates, I'd echo their thanks for hosting us and allowing us to give our perspectives tonight. I'd ask for your vote because I've worked on educational and broader equity issues in the city for the last 20 years. I was a mentor to 2 boys for 8 years who attended DC and public charter schools, a CASA for foster youth, and have been on the board of literacy and education advocacy organizations. I lived with guys coming out of prison for about a decade, and together we grappled with how to support them, really supporting their next generation and ensuring that their kids went to the best school for them. And I have 20 years of financial and operational management experience, which I think is critical to ensure that we're holding DGS and other agencies accountable to school modernization and effective buildings. Most importantly, though, like all the other candidates, I care deeply about this work in education, and I want to listen. I want to learn from you all, and I want to center voices of teachers, parents, and students as we make decisions.
Thank you. And finally, Alyssa.
Good evening, WTU. I'm Alyssa Silverman. I'm one of the incumbent at-large council members. I'm one of the 2 independents on the council, and I chair the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. Over the 8 years I've been on the council, the WTU and I have been collaborative partners. and making sure that you have fairness in the workplace, fighting for an evaluation system that's fair, and of course, good wages for the work that you do. I'll just say that let's take the past 2 years. So as labor chair, I worked with both Liz, your former president, and Jackie, your current president, in making sure that the chancellor came to the table to talk about making sure that your workplace, our schools, were healthy workplaces in COVID. And that wasn't easy. So I look forward to working with you, and I ask for one of your 2 votes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Michael.
Hi, furiously typing notes. Okay, my question is, what would your vision for school governance in DC look like?
And we'll be starting with Kareem.
Okay, so I think the most important thing to start with is an understanding that we need to build a system that works for all of our students. And I think we can look at what's happened over the last couple of years, particularly because of the misfeasance and misapplication and misappropriation of funds. We've lost like at least 5.3 million that we know of from a couple of mismanagements in the charter school system. I think we need to be looking at this from the perspective of how do we have a system that works for all of our students? So for me, this system works best if we have a single person in charge of the system that we can hold accountable. And we can have a conversation about whether or not that person is a mayor or a professionalized chancellor or a professionalized superintendent, where we can be a little bit more prescriptive about what their qualifications are, whether or not they're suited or suitable to be able to lead a cadre of educators. But that's a conversation I want to have around details. I think we need to have a state board that is very much active in making sure that smart policies are being set around education. And then we need to actually have a council that does the oversight it's supposed to do. The fact that we haven't had an oversight committee in the council for 6 years that's been effective is a little troublesome to me. I feel like the council has abrogated its duty in being a part of that responsibility.
Thank you. And next we'll have Kenyon.
I think we might have actually lost them.
Okay. You didn't lose me, but you didn't lose me, but I am cutting it off every now and again just to make sure I maintain my connection. I appreciate the question. So, I think this is one of the most important questions to ask today. What should the school governance system look like? I matriculated when we had a very different system. We saw changes made when Anthony Williams was mayor and then when Adrian Fenty became mayor. I think ultimately what we need is a system that works for our entire education community, placing children and students first and making sure that teachers can teach with the resources that they need to educate our children in a way that is safe, both for the students and for the teachers. I think that focusing on individuals who are in leadership and making decisions is absolutely vital. I think that we need a strong state board of education, but we need to also make sure that we're not focusing too much on the structure of who was making decisions outside of the classroom, because I think there's no more important role in the education of our youth than the folks who are in the system, in the classrooms, being with them. They spend a lot more time than a lot of people, a lot of the parents in some cases. And so I think it's important to make sure that the focus is less on the folks who have tangential effects on our system and more on the teachers and students and parents who are dealing with it.
Thank you. Next we have Graham.
When I think about school governance, I think about it at 3 levels: the macro school system, the school itself, and the classroom. And when we think about the macro school system, one of the challenges is the left hand and the right hand don't know what's occurring. You might have a charter school that's going in and you don't even realize it from a DCPS standpoint. So I think the critical aspect is ensuring that we have a unified citywide plan to really think strategically about what is the infrastructure to support our kids, our teachers, our school staff, our parents. When you think about the school itself, I think about the money following the children who are being educated and the voices of the students, the parents, the teachers, the school staff being centered on the decision making in that school and their feedback being top priority. And then thirdly, in the individual instruction level in the classroom, the expert, the teacher, being given the support, the tools, the resources to do the job that they know how to do effectively. So those are the 3 levels I think about it and how I think about governance.
Thank you. Next, we have Alyssa.
So I think the governance question is always a third rail in district politics. Here's what I will say. What we're currently doing isn't working. In that we're not seeing that our high poverty schools, especially in wards 5, 7, and 8 in DCPS, are seeing the benefits of the mayoral control system. I think, you know, I think this is a broad question. I swim in my lane. First, the council needs to have a standalone education committee to focus on oversight. I think I said that 10 times in my WTU questionnaire. You know, in terms of, we need to do better in terms of communicating with parents and teachers. That's not a governance issue. That's just a relationship issue. Okay, my time is up clearly, but I think we got to do what we're doing right now just isn't helping a lot of our kids and teachers.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get more questions that are around governance. And next, finally, we have Fred.
Thank you so much. As a business owner, I look at it from the perspective that the mayor has not done what she needed to do. As I said earlier, I know that one of the things that challenges a lot of our teachers and actually any staff member of the public school system is that they're not being compensated for what they do. That doesn't afford them the opportunity to live in the district as well. I call for a 30% pay raise. Some of the other things that when we talk about what a school system should look like is that there's not enough involvement or inclusion that I have experienced with my own grandchildren going to school through COVID that came from our government. There needs to be greater oversight from the council. There does need to be a separate board that manages the school system and keep the mayor out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Concha Johnson. Oh, Concha, it's still on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. What strategies will you employ to ensure you're actively supporting each ward regarding their educational needs?
And we are starting with Kenyon.
And thank you for the question, Concha. I think it's important to make sure that in addition to having a listening ear to understand what the needs are of teachers who are on the ground in the classrooms and who I think understand and know the students better than anybody else in the system, is to make sure we show up and we're observing, we're listening, we're seeing what's going on. We know that we have all experienced a pandemic that has wrought havoc on our education system, which is one of the reasons why I am constantly reaching out, asking questions about how we can be of support to our teachers. And so when it comes to the schools across District of Columbia, we know that different schools have different needs. Different schools also have different resources. So make sure the resources flow to the schools in a more equitable way, I think is incredibly important. We know that issues around at-risk use, transparency in school budgeting, as well as making sure that parents feel empowered regardless of the resources they bring at fundraisers and other outside school activities. So I think it's important that we make sure that we show up, we ask questions, we listen, and that we provide the resources in a more equitable way to ensure that the quality education flows regardless of what ward you're in.
Thank you. Graham.
It's so important that we stop accepting that we make mistakes that really hurt our kids. I think it's over $450 million that we put towards at-risk funding that we're not sure if it worked. And when you look at the different schools and the modernization work and the progress that is made in particular schools, the eye test allows you to see that there are inequities in education. And so we can say all of the things we want on these strategies and that strategies, but we know if it's working or not. We know if we're investing the same amount. There are a lot of specific policies putting in place but there are money in funds that are just not going to the appropriate place that they're earmarked for, and they're not being used. We need folks to get into the details, hold folks accountable, and ensure that money is going to support kids that need it.
Thank you. Next is Alyssa.
I think it's time we re-examine how we budget for schools. Because what's crazy about the per pupil funding formula and the at-risk weight is when we look at our highest need schools, it seems like they don't have the resources and that they're losing teachers instead of having additional resources. The second thing I say, we need to have a baseline of certain things that we just have to have. We have to have nurses. We have to have reading specialists. And there's just a baseline that we need to have in every school. And then in terms of the budgeting, we have to compensate. We have some schools like Lafayette in wards 3 and 4 that independently raise $1 million to supplement, through their parent teacher organizations. And what I would say is, I'm not against Lafayette parents contributing in their school, but then we need to compensate because Martin Luther King Elementary in Ward 8 isn't going to raise $1 million. And that's what our public tax dollars are for, to be able to compensate and create equity by giving King Elementary the supplemental dollars they need.
Thank you. Fred.
Okay, I think it's really, really sad that when I saw the reports that shows that DC schools are rated number 41 out of 51 states. And we have people who have been on the council that could have raised concern long before now for the way to get that far. The same people managing the money of the city that could have held another branch of government accountable for mismanagement continuously, but nothing was done. And the only way we're going to fix that part is that we change from those people who sit in those seats right now that haven't done anything in the last 10 years, 8 years, 10 years. We get people in that have experience. I have experience in recognizing one thing. I hire the people who have the knowledge and the skill set, and I hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kareem.
Can you hear me? Okay. So as far as strategies, I think the most important thing that we can do regarding governance of DCPS is to be smarter about the way we budget. There's a bunch of operational changes that we can probably make that would improve the ability of us to operate on a day-to-day basis. But, and again, I know you're going to hear a lot of the council has failed us, the council has let us down. But in this case, I think there's been a real problem with the fact that we haven't had an education committee in 6 years. If we are really serious about doing the job of the council actually overseeing education, there needs to be a standalone committee. And that standalone committee needs to be empowered to work with all the stakeholders and to make sure that we have a plan for what it means to make sure that our students are educated, our teachers are respected, and our facilities are kept up to date. And without that, we're going to have more of the same and more excuses in 2 more years.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Lisa Haynes. And Lisa, do you have the question or should I post it in the chat?
Hi, if you would post it in the chat, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
No problem. All right, there it is, Q3. You see it?
One moment. I do. Is there a pattern of behavior in DC where contract negotiations go years past the contract expiration date? There is a pattern. Excuse me, I teach special education. I need to read this again. There is a pattern of behavior in DC where contract negotiations go years past the contract expiration date. How would you improve collaborative and timely collective bargaining agreements between DC agencies and respective unions.
All right, and I believe we're starting with Graham.
I think one way we can do that is to force the issue as a city and say, if we don't hit something by X date, then Y goes into place. I think if there's a timeline that everyone has to be working towards, or we know what occurs, then everyone at the table is better off to create a deal. And then secondly, I do think if there is a mediating influence that can work with the two sides in some of these contract negotiations, say, hey, what are we in agreement on, and what can we kind of work towards? I think it's a really tough issue that we're obviously, we've been struggling with as a city for many years. But I think putting a stake in the ground and saying, if we don't hit by this date, this is what goes into place, is where, as a legislature could be valuable.
Thank you. Next is Alyssa.
So I keep asking the head of the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, Lindsay Maxwell, do you have enough attorneys to negotiate the contracts? I don't think we have the adequate staff at OLRCB to be negotiating the contracts that we have. And that leads to all kinds of delays because, as the WTU knows, when I do oversight, I keep asking, how long does it take for you to negotiate the contract? And I keep hearing about, well, it takes a while for the OLRCB lawyers to come back to us. So I think, number one, we should have adequate staff at OLRCB and also adequate budgeting in the I'm sorry, it's like 9 o'clock at night, so I'm blanking on the budget line we have for our union contracts. But I think sometimes the mayor slow rolls the contracting for budget reasons, and we shouldn't do that.
Thank you. Next we have Fred.
Okay, in contract negotiations, there has not been enough enforcement and accountability when it comes to what we know we're going to go through every single time it's time to do that. And there needs to be, as I'm a veteran and went through these kinds of things on numerous occasions, if we don't put a stake in the ground and say it's an either or, and we cut off the mayor from putting these stalemate effects into the system, the children and the parents and the teachers are those who suffer. And we need to take this away from the mayor, let it remain under the council as an oversight committee, and then we have the state board of education or local board of education to be the one that carries out the management of it. This is what we need to do to eliminate the downfall. Again, 41 out of 51 states is horrible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Kareem.
So I think the challenge with this is that every year the council sends over a series of questions to agencies. And one of the questions that they ask are, do you have enough resources to meet your statutory obligations? They ask the question and they know that the answers are going to get filtered through the mayor's office. They know that the agency has to say yes, or they have to deal with some issues around their reporting chain. So if you see that they aren't able to meet their mission and they tell you that they have enough resources to meet their mission, why are we pretending like this answer is truthful? We know they don't have enough staff. Now, I worked as a legislative director for an agency for about 5 years, and I know what it's like to have that negotiation with the union. And when I was an attorney for DPW for 2 years, I understand how important that bargaining agreement is to be able to make sure that the rules are clear. So what I'm saying is, if you know that they're backlogged, we need to start something like delay clauses. And this is the advantage of actually putting a practicing attorney on the council, is that there are solutions for this. You can look to the way in which we operate, and we know that there's a gap. You can fill that gap with a delay clause so that at least the pay can increase over time until the new terms are negotiated.
Thank you. Finally, Kenyon.
I appreciate the responses of the other candidates. I'll tell you, as somebody who used to carry mail and pay union dues, member of the letter carriers union, I know how important these negotiations are, and frankly, how it affects morale. You aren't going to hear a single candidate or elected official tell you that teachers are important to our education system. You'll hear people tell about how absolutely vital they are. Well, if they're so vital, then these contract negotiations should not drag on, period, full stop. When I was an advisor to Deputy Mayor Paul Quander, when he served as the interim chief of staff under Vincent Gray, I was proud to work as a part of reestablishing the Labor Management Partnership Council. We put together a strategic plan. It needs to be enforced. It needs to be implemented. We need to make sure that you're doing all the things in advance of these really serious negotiations so they don't drag on and so you don't impact the morale of some of the most important public services in the District of Columbia, and that is our teachers.
Thank you. I am going to move into the Q&A section. A lot of questions cropped up and many of them were about the contract. But I think we've kind of addressed it as much as probably we can here. So I'm going to take this question here at the top. So it is a question about just your connection, your personal connection to DC public schools. So it is kind of, do you have children? And if so, are they in DCPS? And if it is DCPS, what's been your engagement with that school? And for those of you who don't, could you just tell us about how you have engaged with DC public schools in particular? And we are starting, I believe, with Alyssa.
I don't have children in DCPS. I don't have children, but I'm in our schools. I visited Lisa's school, as she knows. I was in 6 DCPS schools before school began, and I have regular visits, to schools throughout the year. The recent visits, I will be honest with you. Actually, Lisa invited me to her school, and I've been several times. But I will say, I actually was helping out my Ward 4 colleague, visiting some of the schools in her ward, which led to all the attention about the DGS facilities issue, because I was just shocked, frankly, at and here's what I said to DGS: it's demoralizing, it seems to me, to you guys and to the facilities crew to complain about the same issues persistently and they never get fixed. That's just unacceptable.
Thank you. Next we have Fred.
Yes, as I stated, I have 3 grandchildren in public school system, one with special needs. And one of the things that I've done over the last 7 years is I personally use my funds to feed some of the families, some of the good foods that they don't generally get because they live in a food desert or not having the attention to be able to get to the ability to get to some of those areas. I've raised major concern, especially before COVID, about the conditions and the arrangements with DGS and the conditions that they leave the children, the teachers, and the parents. And when they know that every time they open the school, everything has to be a go. And they've had plenty of time and resources to get it done, but they have not. And again, that comes from bad management, leadership. And if we as a council don't hold them accountable, they will continue to take advantage of our teachers, and our parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kareem.
So yeah, I'm a product of DCPS, and I'm very proud of that fact. So that's my emotional connection. But I remember how important it was for me to be able to walk to school. Like being able to walk to school in elementary school, I remember it being a very stabilizing influence on my life, especially around 4th grade. So the way I engage currently is I've got a 2-year-old, and my wife and I are frankly terrified of the lottery system. We don't think that going to a school that is adequately resourced should be a matter of chance. I think that all of our schools need to be adequately resourced. We need to make sure that every school, every teacher, every classroom has what they need. And if I'm your next council member, I will make sure that teachers don't have to come out of their pockets in order to decorate their classrooms, that our teachers aren't impoverishing themselves to make sure that there's a healthy and constructive learning environment for their students. That's something the city should be taking care of. And finally, one of the things that I used to do to volunteer, I used to read with Everyone Wins before the pandemic. So before I had a child of my own, I was reading to other young children in schools to make sure that they had that early intervention in literacy.
Thank you. And next we have Kenyon.
Thank you. I do have 2 kids, and they are in schools in DC. They have been through multiple schools over the course of their education. My personal connection to DC public schools is that I'm an alum. I started in DC public schools as a child, me and my 3 siblings, and I finished at Jackson Reed. My dad graduated from Bell Vocational. My mom graduated from Western. My wife graduated from Banneker High School, and the connection runs deep personally. But I also have a connection through my work as a council member and making sure that I stay connected to the Teachers Union. Asking questions, reaching out to President Pope Lyons to make sure that they had what they needed when the pandemic struck and we were trying to revisit and get back into schools. I think the connection runs deep with the resources that I've invested in schools over the years. When I chaired the committee that had oversight of DGS, visiting schools across the District of Columbia, like Leckie, Janney, Stanton. I visited multiple schools to start this school year, including Dunbar, including Noyes, including Phelps. I stay in the schools because I believe it's the foundation to build opportunities for people to be able to stay in the District of Columbia at a time where they feel like they're pushed to the margins.
Thank you. And finally, Graham.
Well, first, Lisa, I need the invite. It sounds like you and Alyssa are having a great time. So I want in on that at some point. But I
Absolutely.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, hopefully I will be visiting Bunker Hill soon then. But I live about a block from Eastern, and they have the best community garden in the city, or school garden in the city. So volunteered there, have stolen a piece of kale here and there to munch on while we're working. I have visited some schools while campaigning, including getting dominated on the new basketball court at Johnson Middle School, but we won't talk about that one very much. Like Kareem, I lead a social responsibility program as my day job, and we partnered in the Everyone Wins program, and have been a tutor myself. And then I spoke to some of the things that I've done from a mentorship with boys in DCPS, and they were at other non-DCPS schools as well. So try to bring some of that. I don't have kids myself, but really want to be able to center the experiences on kids, parents, teachers as we make policy.
All right, so I know it's late. We started a little late, so if we have time for one more question, we'll do one more round. There are a lot of questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to just go with the one near the top because I think it has been a really hot topic, and kind of combine it with one of the ones that we asked previously. This is about testing, standardized testing in particular. So it really just comes down to, I'll read them, the previous question, and kind of connect it back to park and timing. So there's never been a generation of students more tested than current K-12 students. Most schools plan little instruction in the fourth quarter because of all the end of year testing. And this year, elementary schools are reporting that they're required to test every week. So what is your position on testing, the number of tests and instructional days lost to testing, as well as, coming back to the one that's still open, the fact that students took a test coming right out of the pandemic and had then been held accountable for it at the school level. So it's kind of just all about your thoughts on standardized testing, its timing, how often we're taking standardized tests, and what we should be doing moving forward. And we are, starting with, I think we're back to starting with Fred.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I think this is one of the things that really creates a major problem. Pressure on the teachers to put forth information that's not correct from a weak mayor, and not being considerate of the staff, the students, and parents. Although I believe that there's some measurement that needs to be done to make sure that we are on the right track, just not as frequent as what we're seeing right now. There are other methods that can be done to capture whether a child is ahead or behind. And again, looking at the rating that we have right now, when are we going to wake up and realize that if we don't learn from our history, we are doomed to repeat it? Winston Churchill said that some years ago, and it still works today. We need to make a drastic change in our school system if we want to see drastic results coming from our kids, protect our children, protect the parents. And again, give that 30% pay raise to all the school staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kareem.
I heard a saying once that stuck with me. Everyone has their own type of genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's gonna think it's an idiot. I believe that one of the flaws that we have in our testing methodology, and I say this as somebody who is really good at standardized tests, but we rely too much on one type of test to evaluate the progress of someone against learning objectives. We need to, it's 2022. We have to figure out a way to track and evaluate and measure the progress of our students in a way that doesn't rely on them filling in bubbles on a test. We have options available to us. There's a lot of studies on ways that we can actually evaluate and measure tests, or evaluate and measure progress that is not just relying on standardized tests. So I think we need to be more creative in working with our federal partners to make sure we're meeting those requirements to keep our funding, but also making sure that we're giving our kids a learning environment that works for them. And then finally, I don't appreciate the fact that we had the test kids coming straight out of COVID. I know a lot of that was based off of strings attached to federal funding, but I don't like it. And I think it was definitely disruptive and problematic. I would have preferred that we found a way to be more creative and get an exemption.
Thank you. Oh dear, what did I do? I just closed one of my boxes. Next we have Kenyon.
Thank you for the question. So I think we rely too much on testing of students and evaluating of teachers, and it creates, I think, the kind of focus that takes away from what's most important. You know, really, are kids learning, and how are they learning? I think about the fact that we test kids so that they, quote unquote, show us what they know. And we look at it whether or not they have strengths here and there. I think the reality is there's so many ways that kids can show us what they know and what their strengths are. I'll say, I think now more than ever, the city really needs to be making targeted investments in schools in a way that's serving students who really face, I think, the steepest barriers to learning before and during the pandemic. And I think most of these schools, as we know, serve Black and brown children and children from low-income communities. So I think the focus needs to be more on that and less on testing, unless we're going to be expanding it to show, to really evaluate kids on what they know beyond what these simple tests do. So,
thank you. Next we have Graham.
I'm not going to act like I'm a testing expert, and I'll go back to the point that I said before, which is, I would legislate based on the feedback of parents, teachers, students, and really centering on those voices and what the evidence tells us. And so, my point on that would be, I think the PARCC test taking like 3 weeks and then and you're losing all of these instructional days is a problem. Would bring together a group to say what is the best solution that centers on the feedback of others. But I think it goes to a broader point too, since this is the last question, which is how are we supporting teachers and other school staff holistically? How are we doing student loan payback, free childcare, 0% home interest loans, $1,000 for school supplies, more for school supplies, no ceiling on tax rebates. I'd keep going, but I think there's a lot on retention and support that goes into overall instructional aspects that allow us to give our kids the best learning experience, including reducing tests.
Thank you. And finally, we have Alyssa.
I think there's too much emphasis on high stakes testing. I think we need to go back to teaching, learning, and how to learn. I'm a council member, but I'm also an employer. And when I hire people who are good learners, who are comfortable with the unknown, who are able to problem solve. And Park and the tests don't teach that. We do need to have some measurement of where our kids are. But I think we have too much emphasis on high stakes testing. And frankly, I think that it's unhealthy given the social emotional issues we have. We know when kids are anxious, they don't test well. I'm somebody who has anxiety, so I can tell you that. You freeze and you can't function. And I think the high stakes testing just exacerbates some of the social emotional issues we have with our kids. It's not healthy, it's not productive, and it doesn't lead to, I think, a healthy learning environment.
Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for being with us tonight, and thanks for staying late. I know we had to be a little flexible, try to make sure we weren't putting you all in a situation where we had to choose between forums. No one would want that, so we can get the word out to as many people as possible. And we'll be talking amongst ourselves, and we kind of have upcoming membership meetings where the members will eventually decide who we endorse, and we'll be reaching out and making our announcements, hopefully. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.